In the last video, we were able to put together all the different visuals that we've created over time, the lost customers, the retention metrics that we have here, and we have all the different metrics that we can choose from to show right here. So for today, I promise that we're going to be looking at the weekly cohort, because what we have here right now is a monthly cohort. We can just create another visual for the weekly cohort. So for starters, we need to look at our model again one more time, right? So if we go back to the model, we see that we have fact sales, dim date, and the customers. The customers table, we have the first transaction month. We don't have the first transaction week. That's something we should take note of. Then here also we have the month since first transaction. We also need a column for week since first transaction. And then in the dim date table, we also need a start of week column. So to do this, let's go back to Power Query and transform the data. Let's start with the date table. All we have to do is go to add column and then click on week. Let's go to start of week. And now we have the start of week. So this is done. It's simple and straightforward. Then let's go back to the dim customers table. In the dim customer table, we see that we already have the first transaction month. So let's just go back by one step. So this column here, which says first transaction month, is actually giving us the dates, because it's giving us the individual dates, not just the month, not the month itself. Because we see that in the next step, we are able to add a step that transforms that particular column. So it means that we can now go back to that step and add a new column called first transaction week. To do that, we just select this column, the first transaction month, and we insert a start of week. Then we rename this to first transaction week. First transaction week. Transaction week. With that done, all we have to do next is go to home and close and apply. So the new columns we've added will show in the data model. And then there's one more thing that we need to do. If you go to the data view, go to fact sales, you see that we have months since first transaction. So what we would like to have next is weeks since first transaction. So we can just copy this formula. You don't need to change much. We'll be doing a lot of copying. So after a few steps, I will just pause the video, do it to make the video shorter. And you can also do it on your own. So I'll just copy this and I'll add a new column. And paste the formula we just copied, and I'll change this to weeks since first transaction. Now, based on what we've done, we know that there's first transaction week in the customers table, and we also know that there's a start of week in the dates table. Then remember that what we are trying to find now is a difference in weeks, not in months. So we change this to week. Then we click on OK. So this should give us value starting from 0 upwards. Now we have the weeks since first transaction. So we see 0, 0, 0, 1, 7. That's like 7 weeks later, 100 weeks later, 4 weeks later. So that's fine. So if we should go back to the model view, we see that now we have, let me see, first transaction week. We see that we also have, expand this, week since first transaction. Then we also see that we have start of week. So that's the basics. We've been able to set up the basic things we need. So let me save this. So let's continue. For example, for the retention metrics here, for the monthly cohort retention metrics, you realize that we have a lot of parameters here that we are using. I think I need to modify this value so that they show better, because right now they're not showing fine. It's not good. So we need to create all these metrics for the weekly cohort. And to make sure that we are not confused by the many measures that we have here, we can group all these measures into a single folder since they are for the monthly cohort. Let's go back to the model view and select measures. Then we can select all the measures that we have here, expand the properties, and call this monthly cohort. This makes sure that we stay organized and we know what we're doing right, and we don't mix one formula for another or one function, one measure for another. Save this. So now we have all our monthly cohorts here, the measures that we've used there. So up next, we know active customers is fine, so we don't need to worry about it. Then let's see, let's look at new customers, for example. So we want to calculate weeks since first transaction. So we're looking at weekly new customers. We can copy this. You'll be doing a lot of copying. You don't need to write new formulas again. You just need to modify some of the conditions that you've applied, the filters that you've applied to get new results. So after that, we click on new measure. And we paste it here. So we rename this to weekly new customers. So active customers is still going to be the same because no monthly filter was applied here. Then we change this to weeks since first transaction is equal to 0. Click on OK. So we have that measure created for us here. So what we can do is let's just add a new page, and let me ungroup this. So we have this table here with the cohorts and new customers. Remember, the cohort in this instance, if you should look at this, the cohort is the start of month. But now we want to deal with weekly metrics. So the start of month is no longer going to be our cohort. The cohort is going to be the start of week. So we check this option and change it to start of week. Then we don't want to use date hierarchy. We want to use start of week. We see the value here. So the date is looking what's the code? I say cluttered or not readable, very readable. So what we can do is go to start of week and go back to, let's look for a fine date. Let's use this 14th March. Yeah. So we see the dates better now. It's more readable. We have new customers here. This may look like it's correct, but I don't want to take chances. So what I will do is to, instead of using the new customers from the monthly cohort, I'll use the new customers from the weekly cohort. So I'll just remove this new customers and I'll go to weekly new customers. So to make this more readable, I'll take away the weekly and just leave new customers. So this is fine. It looks good. And now we have our new customers. You see that you're not going to be doing a lot of new calculations. You're going to be copying and editing the existing measures that you've written. So I would like you to also try it out, at least so that you know where to edit and what to change. But let me do one more before I skip it. So let me go to the cohort performance. So we see cohort performance is right here. Let's copy cohort performance. And we want to add a new measure. This time around, we want to do the weekly cohort performance. So I'll change this to weekly cohort performance. And remember, anywhere you see month, change this to week. So here we are changing this to start of week. We are also changing this to start of week. Then active customers, that's fine. We want to change this as well to start of week, remove filters, then first transaction week, and then first transaction week. You see that, right? So it's the same process, nothing new, nothing has changed. Weekly cohort performance. And then, so we change this to greater than 0. So we don't need that again since we already have the new customers. We apply filter. So the values here will look small since you're moving on weekly basis. Then remember, we're no longer dealing with the monthly cohort only. Now we can still use the date filter. So I'm taking this out, inserting the date filter. And now we would want to go, let's test out for a month. So this is a bit readable for us. Let's go to 2010, January. And remember, since it's a weekly cohort, your start date is going to be the first day of the week, which is Monday. So this is 4th. And then let's go to the end date. Let's go to 2010, January. So the end date is going to be a Sunday, which is 31st. So we see, let's adjust this a bit. Let me see. One more time. Okay, this looks fine. So now we see, let me adjust. So now we see the results, right? So we see for January, the first week of January, the number of customers we've been able to retain over the next few weeks in that month. Then we see 11 January, we see the new customers, the number of customers we're able to retain. Then we see 18th, then we see new customers in the last week. Then we don't get to see the number of customers that we've retained because 25th is the start of that week. If you look at it carefully, 25th is the start of that week. So all customers here are new, and we've set a limit. If you want to see the customers that were retained, they will just have to shift one more week forward. And now we see that out of these customers, only 2 were retained. And now we have the number of new customers. So that's just great and it answers our questions, right? So that's one step out of it. You can choose to increase the font size and other things to make it more visible. So what we need to do next is, okay, let me do one more before I skip to where we have to put the visuals together because I want you to really create the visuals. You're not going to be creating new measures, right? You are going to be editing your existing measures. So let's look at one more measure. Let's look at the retention rate. So you see nothing, we're not changing anything here. So we copy this and create a new measure. Then we paste it right here. Then we call it weekly retention rate. And for the cohort performance, we go to weekly cohort performance. And for the new customers, we go to weekly new customers. And then click on OK. Enter to save your measure. Then we can now comfortably come back to this visual and remove the values. And now we can look at the weekly retention rate. So we have this as decimals. Let's convert this to percentage. Then we don't want any decimal. Let's take the decimal to 0. For the week that starts with 4th, so we see the retention rate and we see the retention rate for other weeks as well. So this is just the basic. So what you will be doing is to go through these measures one after the other and create the weekly versions of those measures. For example, churn customers. So you know what to do here for churn customers. You know what to change, right? You know what to change. For churn rate, you would have created new measures, right? and you know what to change right here. You change to weekly churned customers. Then for active customers last month, you know that by the time you're doing this, you're going to be looking at active customers last week, which is going to be a bit different. And you will not use this measure called previous month. You use like date difference, right? You use like date difference, not date difference, rather, you use like date add to get that measure. Then lost customers as well. Let's see. For lost customers, you start work the same thing. You're going to be working with week. Let's see, new. Okay, we've done that. Resurrected customers. You're going to be first month since first transaction. So I would like you to go through it, explore it. If you have any issues, I'll be here to help. Now, at the end, how will I put it? I don't want to go through the process of recording. It's going to make the video longer, considering we did these videos over a long period of time. So I'm going to pause the recording now, create all the measures, and come back. And I'll just show you what everything looks like. Welcome back. So I believe you should have created all the measures that you need to use in the next steps. And just to show you what I've done, for active customers last month, in this instance, we have as active customers last week. So there's no previous week function, so we use date add to get the values for previous week. Then if you should scroll down here, we have the weekly churn rate. We also have the weekly churn customers, weekly cohort performance, weekly lost customers. Then you see date add. That's where we get like last week. If you want to use last 2 weeks, you have to use like minus 14. The same thing applies to the resurrected customers. This should be week, not last month's customers. Let's say last week's. It's just a comment. So this should, for example, what I didn't do is I didn't rename the parameters. This right here, it's working fine. We can leave it. You can choose to rename yours. Mine is working fine. It's not causing any problem. So I'll leave it as that for now. Then we have retained customers. Then let's see. Yeah, weekly retention rate. So these are all the measures. You can, all these variables that you have here, you can rename yours. I think it's even best you rename them, right? So that you know what you're doing and you don't confuse yourself. But the moment you rename this, you have to come here and update it. Otherwise, your measures are not going to run. So let's get started. Let's see how we can visualize this data better. So for the retention matrix here, we already have this here for the monthly cohort. So we have the retention matrix. We have the retention matrix here. We have to create that also for the weekly cohort. So let's minimize this a bit. Retention matrix. You see we have retention rate, cohort performance, churn rate, and churned customers. So let's create something similar for the weekly cohort. So all we have to do is go to modeling, then new parameter, fields parameter. So we call this a weekly retention metrics. So the fields we want to use this instance will be, let's see, weekly. I think we have the weekly retention rate. We have the weekly cohort performance. We have the weekly churn rate, and then weekly churned customers. So we're not going to add this as slicer for now. Then we click on create. So our new parameter is here and is ready to go. So what we can do is minimize this a bit. That's great. So we can now we'll use bookmarks to make it dynamic for us to switch between weekly cohorts and monthly cohorts. So for us to do that, let's go to view. Let's go to bookmarks. We can minimize this a bit. This time around, remember that things that make part of the monthly cohort here are the retention metrics and this visual right here, right? We also have some buttons here, so we're going to follow it one step at a time and see how this works out. I urge you to follow along. So for starters, we're going to select these two visuals. And before that, let's change this from start of month to date. Start of month to date. One more thing, you notice that we could choose to minimize this, but we'll be having issues. So let's go to general settings, properties, advanced, then responsive. So we'll turn it off. So if we turn off responsive, the expectation is that if we should minimize this now, the header won't disappear, which is great. So we can select these two visuals. Let me see. Select these two visual retention metrics and this visual. Then we'll create a bookmark and we'll rename this bookmark to monthly what. So if I should hide this, for example, let me remove data. Then let me go to selection. If I click on selection, I have all this here. I can now rename this to monthly what. Then I can just choose to hide this. I should hide this. You will notice that the retention metrics is still showing. We don't want the retention metrics to show. So let's check and see why that's happening. Text box, metrics. So if we click on this, you see that this slider is not inside, right? So we can rename this to retention metrics. And you can just drag it right here. So now you see that the retention metrics becomes part of the group. Then one more thing, we can choose to duplicate this. Let me see, and copy this group, and paste it. So we call this weekly cohort. This is a weekly cohort, and we can choose to make the weekly cohort visible. And now we have all these visuals here. So what we're going to do is we're going to take it in bits. Remember that now we are looking at the weekly cohort. The monthly cohort is hidden. So now we can modify this. We can choose to replace this with, let's go to the visuals. Instead of having the retention metrics here, we would want to have the weekly retention metrics there, right? So let's rename this to retention metrics. Then we also know that right here we want to have the dates, right? So we want to have the start of week, Then we know that the new customers should be the weekly new customers, not the monthly new customers. Weekly new customers. So we can rename this to new customers. And then the start of week should be cohort. And we can now add the conditionals formatting. I will always have there. This is fine. So we don't format it as 0. Click OK. So this should give us a similar feel as this. That's fine. Up next, we need to modify this as well. So for this, we are going to use the start of week. Again, start of week. And monthly spend transaction, we're removing that as well. Then we are also removing the retention Let me see, why is nothing changing here? Okay, that's weird. Let me see. Okay, we shouldn't be having any visual. Let me see. Okay, let me actually ungroup this. Is going to split out. Yep. Let me see. So we should be getting weeks since first transaction. Where's the fact sales table? Weeks since first transaction. As a column. This is not changing. Let's find out what's happening. Hmm. You sure this is hidden? Which is fine. I should hide this. The visuals will go. I should unhide it. The visual will be back. Oh. Let me see if this, okay, there's no bookmark for this. So it's working as expected. Something was wrong. I don't know what. So we're back. So we have this. And what we need to add next is the weekly metrics that we've created. Click on this and place it here. So it should work fine. And we see 100%, 300%, which doesn't make sense. So for now, let's make sure that no filter is affecting the visual. Let's take out this. Then we can now come back here and add our filter. Since we don't want the first month, it should be greater than 0. Apply filter. So we can minimize this a bit to take a look at what we've done. And this is what it looks like. So this should, instead of months since first transaction, this should be weeks since first transaction. And this is quite big, right? You can't really see what we've done. So we can choose to select for a short period of time. Let's go to 2010 January. Since this is a weekly cohort and our week starts on Monday, select 4th. Then we go to 2010 one more time. January, let's select the whole of January. So 31st, and this is what the result looks like. So you see that the visual doesn't align properly, so we can adjust it a bit. So let's reduce the size of this visual a bit, or we can choose to reduce this as well. And drag this visual back a bit. And now we see the values. So we have for January, we see the number of customers that were retained, the percentage rather, as a retention rate over time. Then we can now switch between different values. This is weekly what performance, weekly retention rate, and weekly churn customers. We can choose to extend this a bit. Let's go to, let's say, let's enter February. We enter February, we see the values adjust. And this works fine for us and it's showing us the results that we want to see. Now, something else we can do right here is to rename these values properly, right? The values are not showing the way just the weekly doesn't make sense. So what we can do is go back to the field parameter that we created and we can just give it a new label. So we can label this retention rate. The next one should be cohort performance, or we can call it retained customers. but we've been using cohort performance, so let's stick to that. Cohort performance, and then okay. Up next, what we have next is churn rate, and finally, what we have here is the weekly churned cost. Okay, just the churned customers. Churned customers. Then click on OK. We can now go back to this place and rename this. You can call it retention labels, for example. You can call it retention labels. So that's the values we added. We'll now go to this retention metrics that we have here for the weekly cohort. And instead of using this directly, we use the retention labels that we just created. So we'll have to rename this, right? So we'll go to visualization and rename this to retention metrics. Now we see that this is a lot easier to read. You don't have to do it weekly. Then we have to change the color of these values. I mentioned we're going to do that when we started because the values here are not that very visible to see. So we will go back to format. Then let me see values. For values, let's choose let's see. Not too sure about this. That's not clear. White would have been best. Would have been the best, but the background here is not white. Let me see. Can we change the background? Great. We can change the background. The background looks fine now. So we can actually copy this color. Let's copy the code for this color. Style. Let's go to fill. And right here, let's get the code. We can now go back here. And format this. Let's go to, okay, not here. Go to values. Then there's background. And we can choose this right here. And this works fine. This is better. So it's a lot easier to read. So we have all the values. So this looks fine. This is a good start. So week since first transaction, we can choose to adjust this a bit and our visual looks fine. So we can choose to switch to churned customers. Great. We can look at the core performance. Great. And we can look at the retention rate. So one thing you will notice is that this doesn't follow the order that we have it here. We have retention rate, core performance, churn rate, and this. So what we will do is we're going to sort this column, right? If you select this column, let me show you, let me expand this a bit. So when we select this column, we have the option to sort by. So we want to sort by the weekly retention metrics order. So if we're done sorting, if we come here now, we see that the retention metrics will show first. So you have retention, forward performance, then the churn metrics will follow afterwards. So you can choose to do that things like increasing the size of this value, but I wouldn't do that right now. So that we are done with just the basics, right? What we need to do next is to see how we can switch between monthly cohorts and weekly cohorts. So what I would like to do for now is to create another bookmark and call this bookmark weekly cohort. This looks fine, but we will have to go back to the monthly cohort and update the monthly cohort. So for us to update the monthly cohort, we would like to hide the weekly cohort, but the monthly cohort should be showing fine, right? So we'll now update this. So if we update this, we can now switch between weekly, monthly, weekly, and monthly. So now we can come to these buttons for example, and if I should assign a bookmark to this button weekly, I also bookmark. And this time around, I want to assign the weekly cohort to this button. Then I would also want to assign another button to this, another bookmark rather, to this. So what you will notice is if I should click, which bookmark are we looking at right now? This is weeks. If I should click on this, we are seeing the monthly cohorts. And if I should click on this, we'll be seeing the weekly cohorts. So that's one. But something that's not happening is that by the time we are changing from one, let me minimize this a bit. By the time we are changing from weekly to monthly, what we're noticing is by the time we're changing from weekly to monthly, the buttons is supposed to indicate that there's a change, right? We're supposed to see something different. For example, like, okay, you're seeing a monthly cohort, you're seeing a weekly cohort. So we need to duplicate these buttons and change their behavior. So for example, if I should, let me duplicate the weekly cohort button. I've duplicated the button. I'm going to copy the properties of the monthly cohort button and use it to format this. Right. So I'm going to place it over here. And okay, before that, let me copy the weekly cohort button and take it up here. Yep. So I'm going to rename, let me see. I'm going to rename it. Instead of weekly cohort, that should be monthly cohort. Let me see style. So this should be monthly cohort. That's fine. Then weekly cohort. So what we're going to be doing is hiding and showing the buttons, right? Just hiding and showing the buttons. So let's go back to selection. Let's open bookmarks. Let's minimize this a bit. So we have this button here. So I'm going to call this monthly is monthly on. Let's call this monthly on. Let me shift it up a bit. So we click it to turn the monthly bookmark on. Then let me click on this button. So we use this to turn weekly off. And one more time, we don't need this. Okay, let's say nav lost customers. Just rename that one. Nav trends, that's for navigation. Trends. Okay, so we use this for weekly on. And this should be monthly off. So those are the buttons that we need right now. So what we're going to be doing is, if right now we are on the weekly cohort, we are viewing the weekly cohort right now. That means the monthly cohort shouldn't be this much visible. It should be a bit in the background. So what I would do is, let me see. So I think it should be, let's see the monthly on. Let me see monthly off. Yeah. So we're going to turn this off and update. Before we update, let's see weekly off should also be off. Now this should be on. Let's go to weekly off. Where are you? Weekly on. Great. So this tells us that we are viewing the weekly right now, and we can click on this button to switch to the monthly cohort. Yeah. So we can just update the weekly cohort bookmark. Don't want data for now, so just update. So after updating this, we know now that we can click on this button. So if we are here, before I do that, if we are here, then this button shouldn't do anything if we click on it because we are already here, right? So what we can do is to turn off the action for that button. We don't want anything to happen if we click on this button because we are already in the weekly cohort. That's fine. Up next, we want it to change, right? When we click on this button. So if we click on this button, when we click on this button, it's supposed to switch the monthly cohort. So let's confirm that the action for this button is on. So instead of weekly cohort, the action should actually be monthly cohort. So when we click on this, it switches to the monthly cohort. That's fine. We can now update our bookmark, right? So let's see weekly exactly, weekly off. So this is on. We have monthly on already. So let me see monthly off. Okay, we want the monthly off on and the monthly on off. Right? We want to make sure that this button has no action, but we want to make sure that this button has an action, which is to take us to the weekly cohort. That's fine. You can choose to name all these navigation buttons differently. So if I should click on weekly cohort, we get to see the weekly cohort. I should click on monthly cohort. You see the monthly? Okay, I didn't update. I didn't update the, let's see one more time. Monthly on. Then let's go to weekly. Let me see. Let me rename this properly. Monthly. So the weekly on. Let me see weekly off. Yeah. So this is fine. So what I would like to do is to update the bookmark. I'm updating the monthly cohort. Update. And now we can switch weekly cohort, monthly cohort. And for monthly cohort, you can always choose the start. I always recommend you choose the start of month, right? Start of month, and you just go some months down. Let's see, 31st. And now we see the monthly cohort. So for the monthly cohort, we would like to adjust this a bit. I think when we made some changes, affected it. So let's see what it looks like. That's fine. So let's be sure that everything is working as expected. Weekly cohort, yeah, weekly cohort is kind of large now because we've selected for a long period of time. Let's go to monthly cohorts. Yep, our monthly cohort is working well. Save your work so that you don't lose your work if anything should go wrong. So we've been able to do some basic things here. You can choose to modify this if you don't want. If you don't like the border here, I was thinking of removing the border. Let me give it a shot and see. This is like a side mission. Turn off the border. Turn off the border. Yeah. So we click cohorts. Okay. So if I should click on this, I see this. Turn off the border. Yeah. So I can hover over it. So the other things you can do, like if you hover over it, you can give it a feel, like we did some funny things down here. You can also do that. Just that in this case, when you hover over this, you get to see the border. Okay. Then instead of this text that says clicks to do something, you can change the text as well. I think this is becoming too long. Let's go to action. Okay, there's no action for this button. What's the action for this button? Two tips. Two tips here will be monthly cohort. So if you hover over this, that's what you should see. So you won't see that click to, and let's do this as well. Two tips. This should be the weekly cohort. So if you publish this report, that's what you're going to see right there. Let me take out this page. I believe I was using it to test an idea earlier. We don't need it anymore. You can now save this. So the other things you would like to add, for example, you can add a reset button, right? Or adjust this to it. Yeah, I think this looks fine. Let me do the same thing for the weekly cohorts. Yeah, it shows that, okay, this is what you're seeing right now. Looks better that way. Yeah. What do you think? You think I should have left it the way it was before? So we can now switch to monthly cohorts and weekly cohorts. That works fine, and we can always navigate to the other pages. Now, what we need to do next is to repeat these visuals now. For example, for the lost customer and more, we need to just create a weekly version of this report, create a weekly version of this report, and create a weekly version of this report. I'm suspecting this video is very long already. I was hoping I could put everything together in one video. So I'm going to stop here for today. My expectation is that we already have the measures that we need, right? You don't need to do much. All you need to do is to change this to start off with create your bookmarks like we did here. So I want you to try this out on your own and see how it works, understand how it works, and make your changes. Don't forget to create your conditional formatting for these values here. And in the next video, we're going to cover everything. It seems like I'm dragging this videos long, but I want to keep them short as possible. So thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video. If you have a comment or a question, you can just drop it. I'll see you in the next video.